I hadn't planned to spend my Saturday rifling through paperwork in my father's study, but that was how things usually unfolded when I came to Westwell. "Just a few forms, Maya," he'd said. "Some light scanning. Won't take long." That was the deal. Every visit came with some hidden cost. A leaky faucet to fix, a checkbook to balance, something to haul out to the garage. I did it without complaint. 5 years of this rhythm. 5 years of silence. I sat at the desk beneath the faded window, the scanner humming quietly as I fed sheet after sheet through its feeder. The light outside was a kind of late winter gray, dulling the edges of everything: the leafless trees, the cracked driveway, even the red brick of the house I once thought I'd inherit. I paused, flexing my wrist, and glanced at the stack of folders I hadn't gotten to yet. One of them was labeled estate plan and final will in my father's blocky handwriting. I hesitated. My job wasn't to open private things. Just scan, save, sort. But my name was Donovan too. This was my family, my legacy. I was tired of pretending I wasn't curious, tired of being the daughter who did everything but knew nothing. I opened it. There it was. Right there in black and white. Beneficiary, Lila Donovan. I read it twice to be sure. Then a third time. There were itemized lists, the house, all contents within. The joint savings account. The life insurance. Bonds I didn't even know existed. All of it to Lila. My name wasn't mentioned. Not once. Not even in a cursory to my other daughter, Maya. No thank you. No recognition. Not even a footnote in my own bloodline. My breath left my lungs like someone had reached in and yanked it out. I sat back in the chair, blinking at the page as if it might rearrange itself and correct the mistake. But there was no mistake. There was intent. This was no oversight. This was a decision. I closed the folder slowly, carefully, like it might shatter in my hands. My skin felt hot, my pulse thudding in my ears. I could hear my father's voice down the hall. He was watching something on TV, some news program he liked to argue with. My mother was in the kitchen, humming tunelessly while she wiped the counters. I stood up. My legs were shaky. I walked to the living room like I was sleepwalking, the folder still in my hand. "Dad?" My voice cracked a little, and he looked up over his glasses, surprised. "Can we talk?" He muted the television, sat up straighter. "Of course. What's going on?" I held up the folder, my fingers tightening on its edges. "I found this while scanning." I wasn't snooping, it was in the pile. But I read it. His face went still. "Maya, is it true?" My voice was sharp now, the panic giving way to something harder. "Everything goes to Lila? The house? The money? All of it." My mother appeared in the doorway behind me, drying her hands with a dish towel. She stopped mid-motion, lips parted. Neither of them spoke. My father cleared his throat. "It's not what you think." "Then what is it?" I said. "Because it reads pretty clearly to me." He opened his mouth, then shut it again. My mother stepped forward, her voice low and deliberate. "Maya, you're strong. You always have been. Lila struggles. She needs the help more." I stared at her. My heart slammed once, painfully. "So that's it? You just, what? Decided I didn't need anything? That all my help, all these years, paying bills, fixing the house, checking in every weekend, that none of it mattered?" "It's not like that," my father said weakly, but he didn't argue the details. He couldn't. "No." I took a step back. "Because it feels exactly like that. You used me. You depended on me. But when it came to your legacy, your gratitude, you gave it all to her." "Lila's your sister," my mother said softly, like that explained anything. "She's family. This isn't about fairness." I laughed, but it wasn't funny. It sounded foreign coming out of me, sharp and broken. "You're right. It's not about fairness. It's about who you really see, and who you don't." I couldn't stay. The house felt like it was closing in on me, the walls too tight, the air too thick. I turned and walked out without another word, letting the front door swing shut behind me. The cold hit my face like a slap. I got into my car and sat there for a long moment, staring at the house, their house, apparently not mine. Not anymore. Maybe never. The trees swayed in the wind, bare branches scratching the sky. I'd known for years that I was the backbone of this family, the one who held it all together quietly, without applause. But now, for the first time, I saw just how invisible that role had made me. They hadn't forgotten me. They'd ignored me on purpose. The engine rumbled to life beneath my hands. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just pulled away from the curb, leaving Westwell behind in the rearview mirror, a hollow place I once called home. And for the first time, I wondered what life might look like if I stopped holding everyone else. The house hadn't followed me, but the ache had. I felt it that night, sitting alone on the couch in my apartment, the city lights of Brookhill twinkling faintly through the windows. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't call anyone. I just sat with the weight of what I'd read, what I'd seen on their faces, what I now knew in my bones. Still, part of me couldn't let it rest. Maybe there was a page missing. Maybe I'd misunderstood something. Maybe, God, maybe, it really wasn't what it looked like. By morning, I knew I couldn't live with maybe. I needed to hear it from them. I needed to say the words out loud, even if I already knew the answers. I drove back to Westwell in a fog, the kind that presses against your windshield and makes the world feel dreamlike, distant. Familiar roads blurred past, the broken fence near the gas station, the field where Lila and I used to race our bikes, the bakery where my mom bought our Sunday bread. All of it felt like it belonged to someone else now. Or maybe it always had. When I pulled into the driveway, my father's car was there. So was my mother's. I didn't call ahead. I didn't want to give them time to prepare. The door creaked when I opened it. The scent of coffee and lemon cleaner hit me like a wave of memory. My father was in the living room again, same recliner, same blanketed knees, the newspaper resting unread on his lap. My mother was folding laundry on the couch. They both looked up when they saw me. Surprise, then unease, passed over their faces. I need answers, I said without preamble, standing in the middle of the room like a stranger. My father shifted, guilt plain on his face, but said nothing. My mother set down a hand towel, smoothing it more than once before meeting my eyes. You read the will, she said. I did. He sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose as if I had caused the headache. Maya, it's complicated. No, I snapped. It's simple. You wrote me out of everything. His mouth opened, but only air came out. No defense. No reason. Just the echo of guilt. And then my mother, ever the soft voice of reason, chimed in with a gentle, infuriating calm. You're strong, Maya. Always have been. You've built your life. You don't need as much. I stared at her. You mean I don't need anything? That's not what I said. But that's what you meant. She didn't deny it. Lila, my father said quietly, she's had a harder time. You know that. The jobs, the rent, the way she makes bad choices, I interrupted. You know that too. And I've spent the last 5 years cleaning up those choices for her. Financially. Emotionally. I didn't complain. I showed up. I handled everything. He nodded slowly. We know. Then why, I asked, my voice shaking now, would you reward her with everything and leave me nothing? The silence that followed was unbearable. It stretched between us like a wall I couldn't scale. My parents, the people I'd sacrificed so much for, looked at me like I was a problem to manage. An inconvenience. My mother finally broke it. Because we thought you'd understand. You always do. And that was it. That was their reason. Because I'd always been the one who understood. The one who held her breath and bit her tongue. The one who kept giving even when there was nothing left to give. They didn't think I needed to be remembered in the will because they assumed I'd carry the burden without being asked. Again and again. I took a step back, my voice low now, almost a whisper. You didn't even talk to me about it. You just decided. It wasn't personal, my father said, and I laughed bitterly. It feels pretty personal. They didn't stop me when I turned for the door. My mother whispered something, maybe my name, maybe an apology, but I didn't turn back. My hand was trembling as I gripped the knob. I paused, just for a breath, the quiet ringing in my ears. I would have done anything for this family, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. And maybe that was the problem. Then I opened the door and left. Outside, the wind had picked up. I zipped my jacket, the cold biting at my cheeks. I walked to my car without looking back. If I looked back, I might hesitate. I might think about the birthdays, the school recitals, the summer barbecues, the scraped knees and bedtime stories. I might remember who I used to think they were. But I couldn't afford that nostalgia anymore. I drove home in silence. No music. No calls. Just the low rumble of the tires on asphalt and the slow, dawning realization that something irrevocable had shifted. The role I'd played for so long, the good daughter, the fixer, the quiet supporter, was gone. And in its place, there was only this, a woman who had just been told, in the clearest terms possible, that all her giving hadn't earned her a place at the table. Not even a chair in the corner. Back at my apartment, I sat on the edge of my bed, phone in hand. There were texts from Lila, memes, a link to some new cafe she wanted to try, as if nothing had happened. I didn't respond. I opened my banking app, closed the recurring transfers to my parents, deleted the weekly grocery reminder, removed the calendar notifications for check-in calls. I didn't do it out of spite. I did it because I couldn't live in this delusion anymore. The truth was in the open now. And maybe it had been for years. I just hadn't wanted to see it. But I saw it now. Clear as day. Silence has a strange kind of power. It settles in corners, creeps into the spaces where conversation used to live, and if you let it stay long enough, it starts to grow roots. That's what happened in the days after I confronted my parents. I didn't tell them I was going no contact. I didn't craft some dramatic farewell. I simply stopped. No more calls on Sunday morning. No more spreadsheets to keep their expenses organized. No more quiet checks slipped into their account to cover groceries or repairs. The leaky sink in the kitchen? Let it drip. The overdue oil change for my father's car? Not my problem anymore. It felt unnatural at first. Like I was holding my breath underwater, unsure of how long I could last. I had spent so long being available, so long being the lifeline, that withholding myself felt like cruelty. But it wasn't. It was self-preservation. And I clung to it like a life raft. 2 weeks passed. Not a word from them. No apology. No explanation. Not even a perfunctory text to ask if I was okay. It was as if they assumed I'd just cool off and come crawling back, resuming my place in the background. That was the part that stung the most, their complete confidence in my compliance. But then, one afternoon, my phone buzzed. I was on my lunch break, sitting in the break room at work, poking at a soggy salad when the notification lit up my screen. Raymond Donovan, taxes are due. No, hi. No, how are you? Just a direct order, like I was still on payroll. Like I still owed him something. I stared at the message for a long time, my fork frozen midair. The audacity of it was staggering. After everything, after they had written me out of their future like I didn't matter, he still expected me to fall in line. To pay. To manage. To fix. I took a breath, felt my fingers tremble slightly as I typed. Maya Donovan, ask Lila. It's her house. I hit send. No hesitation. No second guessing. The silence that followed was almost satisfying. I tucked my phone back into my purse, leaned back in my chair, and felt something I hadn't expected, calm. Not anger. Not guilt. Just peace. Like I'd finally closed a door that had been creaking open for too long. That single reply marked the beginning of a shift, not just in the dynamic between me and my parents, but in me. I had spent years internalizing the idea that it was my job to carry the weight. That if I didn't step up, everything would fall apart. But as the days stretched on and no new messages came, I realized something that should have been obvious all along. They would manage. Maybe poorly. Maybe not at all. But they would figure it out, or they wouldn't. Either way, it wasn't my responsibility. That weekend, I went to a farmer's market instead of calling my mother like I usually did. I bought myself a bouquet of peonies, just because they were pretty. I had coffee alone, without answering questions about utilities or reminding anyone to check their blood pressure. And when I got back to my apartment, I sat on my balcony and read a novel cover to cover. No interruptions. I didn't think about them once. Until Monday. That's when Lila broke the silence. She texted me at 8:07 a.m., like she had been waiting for the exact start of the week to unleash her opinion. Lila Donovan, are you seriously ignoring everyone over a stupid will? I blinked at the message, reread it 3 times. My jaw clenched. So that was her take. That I was being dramatic. That the years I'd spent quietly underwriting their stability could be dismissed with the wave of her hand. Just a will. As if my erasure didn't mean anything. Maya Donovan, you made a choice. Live with it. She replied with a gif of someone rolling their eyes. I blocked her. My phone didn't buzz again after that, not for a while. It was as if they all went into hibernation, unsure of how to proceed now that the usual channel, me, was cut off. I imagined the house in Westwell growing quieter without my regular check-ins, my reminders, my quiet support. I imagined the bills starting to pile up, the usual order beginning to fray. It wasn't petty, what I felt. It wasn't revenge. It was clarity. Finally, I saw the lines between us for what they really were. I wasn't family to them. I was a resource. A safety net they never asked for out loud because they never had to. I was always there, and they built their lives around that assumption. But now? Now they'd have to lean on Lila. And that was the part that scared them. I knew Lila. I loved her once, deeply and protectively. But she was unreliable in a way I had never been allowed to be. She coasted, flitted, fumbled her way through things, always caught at the last minute by someone, usually me. Our parents had coddled her into fragility, and now they were doubling down and trusting her with everything, like it was still the easiest path forward. But easy paths don't last. And I was done smoothing them out. That week, I didn't think about Westwell. Not when I made dinner. Not when I folded laundry. Not when I sat in meetings at work. I didn't check their utility status online or track Lila's haphazard job history like I had in the past. I simply lived my life, and it was terrifying how quickly I began to enjoy it. There was a kind of lightness I hadn't felt in years. The freedom to be quiet, not out of exhaustion, but out of peace. I started journaling again. I picked up my guitar from the back of the closet. I started cooking real meals instead of just heating up whatever was fast and easy. For the first time, I wasn't anticipating a call. I wasn't bracing for a crisis. I was just being. And in the quiet, something bloomed. Something that looked a lot like self-worth. It was a Thursday morning when I saw the bank request. I was halfway through my second coffee, bleary-eyed, trying to catch up on work emails when the alert flashed across my phone screen like a slap. Colette Donovan has requested $3,500. No note. No explanation. No context at all. Just a number. Just an expectation. I stared at it for a full minute, blinking to make sure I was reading it correctly. As if maybe I'd imagined it. But no, it was real. My mother had actually opened a bank app, typed in $3,500, selected my name, and hit send. Like I was still the family ATM. Like nothing had happened. Like we hadn't been locked in a cold war of emotional silence for weeks now. The audacity was breathtaking. I sat back in my chair, phone still in hand, and let the feeling roll through me. It wasn't sadness, not this time. It was a mix of rage and disbelief, a heat that pulsed behind my eyes. I could almost hear her voice in my head, soft and pitiful, justifying it. We're in a tough spot, Maya. We didn't know who else to turn to. The same tired refrain, as if I owed them for having been born. I declined the request without hesitation. The satisfying little red X appeared, and I let it settle like a period at the end of a sentence I was finally learning how to write. But I knew, God, I knew, that wasn't the end of it. An hour later, the text started. First from my father. Raymond Donovan, we're behind on the mortgage. I didn't answer. 5 minutes later. Raymond Donovan, we could lose the house. My jaw tightened. It always came back to the house. The house they'd stripped me out of in ink and legal filings. The house I'd spent years helping maintain, patch by patch, bill by bill. The house they'd given, without hesitation or explanation, to Lila. And now? Now they wanted me to save it. Then the group chat I never checked anymore lit up. Lila chiming in like some kind of comic relief. Lila, Mom says you declined the transfer. Are you seriously letting them drown over this? That was the moment something snapped. I opened a fresh message thread with all three of them, my thumbs flying with clarity I hadn't felt in years. Maya, you wrote me out of everything. You left me invisible. You made your choice, Lila is your future. Let her handle the past. I hit send and felt the tremor ripple through me. My heart pounded, but not from fear. From freedom. From finally saying it, clearly and unapologetically. No one replied right away. That, in itself, was a kind of reply. I tossed my phone onto the couch and paced the apartment, my bare feet making soft thuds against the hardwood. I couldn't sit still. I was buzzing, electrified. For so long, I'd played the reliable one, the predictable one, the one who smoothed things over even while bleeding inside. I had built a whole persona around being the glue. But glue doesn't get credit. It gets used. And I was done being used. They weren't stupid. They knew I could afford to help. That was the part that stung most. They knew I had savings, knew I was careful, knew I planned ahead. That's why they always came to me. Not because they respected me. Not because they loved me more. But because I was easier. Easier than dealing with Lila's messes. Easier than facing their own failures. I was the dependable daughter, and now that I'd stepped out of frame, they didn't know how to function. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine and stared out the window. The city glowed below me, indifferent and alive. I watched people moving, tiny silhouettes on the sidewalk, laughter echoing up faintly from the street. And for once, I didn't feel like I was watching life from behind a pane of glass. I was part of it. Present. Untethered. My phone buzzed again. I didn't even flinch this time. Raymond Donovan, you're being cold, Maya. This isn't you. I almost laughed. Of course this wasn't me, the version of me he was used to anyway. But this Maya? The one who finally said no? The one who had stopped sacrificing her peace on the altar of familial obligation? This was the truest version of myself I'd ever known. I typed slowly, deliberately. Maya, you don't know who I am. You just know what I've done for you. I deleted the message. Not because it wasn't true, but because I was tired of explaining myself. Let them sit with the silence for once. Let them feel the absence they'd never acknowledged. I turned off my phone. I curled up in bed that night and slept like I hadn't in weeks. Deep, dreamless, heavy sleep. Not because things were solved, but because I had finally let myself stop holding what wasn't mine to carry. In the morning, I didn't check for new messages. Instead, I made pancakes. I danced around my kitchen barefoot to a playlist I hadn't touched in years. I opened the windows and let the cold March air into the apartment. And when the sunlight hit my face just right, I smiled. Because I was no longer someone's fallback plan. I was no longer the lifeline. And if they lost the house, then maybe they should have thought about that before making me invisible. I was halfway through folding laundry when my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number at first, and I almost let it go to voicemail. But something about the area code caught my eye. Local. Brook Hill Towers local. I wiped my hands on my leggings and answered. This is Maya. Hi, Ms. Donovan. This is Jessica from the front desk. Your family is downstairs. My heart stopped. My family? I repeated, stunned. Yes, I believe your parents and a sister? They've been here for about 10 minutes. They're asking to come up. I stared at the wall, blood rushing to my ears. The laundry in my hands slipped to the floor. I didn't authorize any visitors, I said, voice low but tight. Yes, of course. We told them that, but they're refusing to leave. I thought I should call you directly. Thank you, Jessica, I managed. I'll come down. I didn't even hang up before I was moving. I threw on a sweatshirt over my tank top and tied my hair back, my fingers moving on muscle memory. My legs felt like they weren't attached to my body. I was angry, but more than that, I was blindsided. They'd never shown up before. They'd always used screens and silence, text messages, and emotional daggers from afar. But this? This was an ambush. I didn't take the elevator. I took the stairs, 2 at a time, needing the movement, needing the burn in my legs to match the heat rising in my chest. I hit the lobby doors hard and emerged into the marble-floored entrance of Brook Hill Towers, and there they were. All three of them. Raymond stood rigid, hands shoved deep into the pockets of his windbreaker, his jaw clenched so tightly I could see the tendons straining in his neck. Colette sat primly on the corner of one of the lobby chairs like it was her living room. And Lila stood off to the side, arms folded across her chest, chewing gum with that infuriating smirk I'd known since we were 12. My mother spotted me first. She stood, smoothing her coat like we were meeting for coffee. "Maya," she said warmly, as if we'd just seen each other yesterday. I stopped a few feet away. "What the hell are you doing here?" She blinked. "We needed to talk." "Unannounced?" "At my building." "You wouldn't respond," Raymond said, his voice deeper, harder than I remembered. "You left us no choice." I let out a bitter laugh. "You had a choice. You just didn't like the one I made." "Maya," my mother said softly, "we're worried." "The house." "No," I held up a hand, sharp as a blade. "Do not make this about the house. You didn't care what I thought about it when you wrote me out of everything. You didn't care how I felt when you gave it all to Lila. So don't pretend now that it's some shared burden." "You're overreacting," Lila muttered, still leaning against the wall like she was bored to tears. My head snapped toward her. "Say that again." Lila rolled her eyes. "It's not that serious, Maya. I didn't ask them to do it. And you're acting like they disowned you. It's not about punishment." "Of course not," I snapped. "Because you got rewarded." Lila straightened. "I didn't ask to be favored." "No, you didn't have to," I shot back. "You've spent your whole life doing nothing while everyone bent over backward to accommodate you. I cleaned up your messes, paid off your debt, covered for you when you flaked, and all I got was a pat on the head and a stack of bills. You get the house." Raymond stepped forward, voice sharp. "This isn't helping anyone. We're trying to salvage this family." I laughed again, the sound too loud in the echoing lobby. "Family? Is that what this is now? You think showing up at my building without warning makes you look like a family? It makes you look desperate." Colette's face pinched with pain. "We're scared, Maya. We're months behind. The savings are almost gone." "Then maybe," I said, stepping in closer, each word clipped and precise, "you should have thought about that before making me invisible." My mother flinched. The silence that followed was heavy. I could feel the stares from the front desk, the security guard shifting awkwardly nearby. But I didn't care. Let them watch. Let the whole damn world watch. "You picked Lila," I continued, quieter now but no less fierce. "You picked her for your will, your trust, your future. Well, congratulations. You don't get to turn around now and ask me to carry the weight when it all falls apart." Colette's voice cracked. "You're our daughter. And that stopped mattering the moment you treated me like a backup plan instead of a person." Lila scoffed. "God, you love playing the victim, don't you?" I turned to her slowly. "No, I used to. I used to swallow everything you all gave me and smile through it. But not anymore. You made it clear who matters. So now you get to live with that." The doors opened behind me as someone entered the lobby. I didn't expect silence after the showdown at Brookhill Towers. But I thought maybe my family would lick their wounds in private. Take the loss with some dignity. Accept that I was gone, that I was no longer theirs to use. I was wrong. It started 3 days later, a ping from a group thread I'd forgotten I was part of, a neighborhood app called Maple Circle. It was a local digital community board, mostly used for lost pet notices, garage sales, and passive-aggressive posts about recycling bins left out too long. I rarely opened it. But the title caught my eye. "When Your Own Turns Cold." The post was from Colette D. My stomach twisted as I opened it. There it was, a long, sweeping paragraph of carefully constructed guilt, designed to look like a harmless lament, but sharpened with familiar passive aggression. She never mentioned my name, but she didn't have to. She wrote about raising children with strong values and endless love, only to watch them turn their backs when times get hard. She said she and Raymond were older now, that things were slipping, and that it was a tragedy to be left behind by the very ones we lifted. She even added a photo, an old one, of her and my dad in front of the Westwell house, smiling, arms around each other. The comments began piling in. "So sorry, Colette. Kids today don't understand loyalty. You two are such good people. This generation is so self-involved. Praying for peace in your family. I slammed my phone face down on the table. My chest was tight. My vision blurred. It wasn't just the post, it was the performance of it. The calculated phrasing. The weaponization of community sympathy. They'd gone public. And then, of course, came Raymond. His post was shorter. A quote in block letters with a stock photo of a cracked picture frame. You can raise them right, but you can't make them stay. No caption. No explanation. But the message was loud and clear. I opened the comments section out of sheer masochism. It was more of the same. Heartbreaking, Ray. You were always such a steady presence. Some people forget who fed them. You deserve better. Every line made my blood burn hotter. They were shaping a narrative, and it was brilliant in its simplicity. Hurt parents. Ungrateful daughter. The world would believe it because it was easy. Digestible. No one asked about the 5 years of bills I'd covered, or the weekends I'd spent patching walls, or the late-night calls about Lila's meltdowns that I'd taken without hesitation. No one questioned what it meant to be erased in a legal document while still being expected to hold up the family in private. No. They just saw two aging parents with sad faces and a daughter who'd gone quiet. Then came Lila's turn. She posted a picture of a wilted bouquet of flowers on a kitchen table. The caption read, "I believe in forgiveness. I believe in love. Even when others don't show it." The comments blew up. "You're so mature, Lila. Your sister could learn from you. Takes a big heart to rise above. Family comes first. She'll come around." I laughed out loud, and it scared me. It wasn't a joyful laugh, it was guttural, bitter. That laugh came from the part of me that had been burning quietly for years. Lila had somehow spun herself into a saint while I was painted as the selfish villain. No one knew. No one knew what I'd given up. What I'd covered. What I'd swallowed. And worse, no one asked. They just took the story and ran with it. The worst part? Some of the people commenting were names I recognized. Former teachers. Church ladies. Neighbors who used to wave at me from across the lawn. People I'd helped shovel out during storms or brought cookies to during the holidays. People who once looked at me with kindness now fed off the drama like vultures. I wanted to scream. To tell the truth. To shake the world by the shoulders and say, "No. You're wrong. You don't know what you're talking about." But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I closed the app. I silenced the notifications. I sat in my quiet apartment, the hum of the fridge the only sound, and I let the fury settle. This wasn't just a family feud anymore. It was a digital campaign. They weren't trying to fix anything. They weren't reaching out to reconcile. They were building an audience. Framing a story. And they were positioning themselves as the fragile, discarded victims of their cold, ambitious, selfish daughter. I could almost admire the strategy. Almost. But the deeper truth? It hurt. It hurt because I knew this was the final mask slipping. They didn't want me back. They wanted their servant. Their fixer. Their silent sponsor. And now that I had refused to play the part, they had written a new character for me entirely, one that better suited their needs. I was no longer Maya, the quiet, dependable daughter. I was Maya, the ungrateful exile. And they were feeding that version of me to the world. I took a long shower that night, steam fogging up the mirrors, trying to rinse the humiliation from my skin. But it clung to me, sticky and unrelenting. I dried off, sat on the edge of my bed, and stared at the wall for what felt like hours. And somewhere in the stillness, the fear began to die. Because something else was rising in its place. A voice. My voice. They wanted a stage? Fine. I'd give them one. But this time, I wouldn't be hiding in the wings. It took me 3 days to write the post. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I knew exactly what I wanted to say. Every word mattered. Every sentence was a declaration. I wasn't just responding to lies. I was reclaiming my truth. By the time I sat down at my laptop, Maple Circle had turned into a digital whisper campaign. Even people who barely knew us were chiming in. Someone posted, "My aunt knows the Donovans." I heard the daughter ran off to the city and left them to rot. Another person commented, "That's the problem with kids today. They think boundaries mean betrayal. It was everywhere. And it was getting louder. But I didn't feel small anymore. I wasn't shrinking from it. I wasn't hiding. Not this time. I opened a blank post and typed my name at the top. Maya Donovan. Then I began. For those who've been following my family's recent public grievances, allow me to share the version you haven't heard, the quiet one. The one that doesn't come with curated sympathy posts or performative grief. The truth. I took a breath, rolled my shoulders back, and kept going. For the last 5 years, I've supported my parents financially, emotionally, and logistically. I paid for repairs on their house. I covered medical bills. I dropped everything on weekends to help with errands. I made sure they had groceries. I made sure they were never alone. I never asked for recognition. I never made noise about it. When my sister Lila was between jobs again, I stepped in. When her lease fell apart, I helped her get into a new apartment. When she racked up credit card debt, I lent her money. I was the family's emergency plan. Quiet, consistent, and never once thanked. My fingers flew across the keyboard now. I wasn't second-guessing. I wasn't trying to protect anyone. And then, a few weeks ago, while scanning documents for my father, I found their estate plan. Everything, the house, the savings, the assets, was left to Lila. My name wasn't mentioned once. Not even a line acknowledging me. After all I gave, all I did, I wasn't just overlooked. I was erased. I paused there. Let it breathe. Then I continued. When I confronted them, they told me Lila needed it more. That I was strong. That I would understand. That was their justification for discarding me. So I walked away. And since then, I've been harassed, guilt, and publicly shamed by the very people who benefited from my silence for years. My mother, my father, and my sister have taken to Maple Circle to paint me as cold and ungrateful. They've used photos, quotes, and vague posts to stir sympathy and manipulate perception. But they never once mentioned the years I spent holding everything together. They never told you that the only time they noticed my absence was when it affected their bank accounts. I could feel my pulse thudding in my neck. But it wasn't panic, it was power. A deep, settled power that came from finally speaking in my own voice, not the filtered, diluted one they'd trained me to use. I'm sharing this not for attention, but for clarity. Because I refuse to let my silence be rewritten as guilt. To everyone reading this, don't let people weaponize your kindness. Don't let them rewrite your absence as betrayal when your presence was never valued in the first place. I loved my family. Deeply. And I gave everything I could to them. But love without reciprocity becomes exploitation. And I will not be exploited anymore. I signed the bottom simply. Maya. I stared at the post for a long time before hitting submit. My heart was pounding, but not from fear, from release. I didn't reread it. I didn't edit it. I let it stand raw and unpolished, because that's what truth looks like. It's not tidy. It's not convenient. It's just real. Within minutes, the comments started. Not the kind I expected. Not the judgment or cruelty I braced for. But support. I remember you from school. You were always helping people. I believe you. This hit me hard. Thank you for speaking out. I've been the Maya in my own family. You're not alone. It didn't stop. The posts spread. People I hadn't spoken to in years were tagging others, sharing, commenting. Former coworkers. Old neighbors. Distant cousins I'd forgotten I had. One woman wrote, "Your story gave me the courage to stop sending money to my brother who hasn't worked in 10 years. Another said, "I feel seen for the first time in my life." I sat there, blinking at the screen, letting it sink in. I wasn't alone. I wasn't crazy. And I wasn't selfish for saying no. People started messaging me directly. One woman, Dana, told me she was going through something similar and asked if we could get coffee. Another offered a resource for adult children navigating toxic family dynamics. I wasn't just shouting into the void, I was heard. I didn't check my family's Maple Circle accounts, though I was sure they saw it. I could only imagine the rage boiling behind their keyboards. But I didn't care. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to fix it. I was witnessing it, naming it, and walking away from it. The post changed something in me. Not just because it went semi-viral, but because it was mine. My version. My moment. My truth without apology. Later that night, I sat on my balcony sipping tea, wrapped in a blanket as the city buzzed below. A spring wind brushed my face, cool and sharp. The stars above were faint, blurred by city lights, but I still looked for them. I thought about the girl I used to be. The one who stayed silent to keep the peace. The one who thought loyalty meant endurance. The one who mistook servitude for love. She was gone now. And in her place was a woman with a voice. A woman who finally realized that being heard doesn't require permission. And neither does walking away. The fallout didn't come quietly. That much I expected. After my post went viral on Maple Circle, the calm was brief. A single day of silence like the eye of a storm. Then it hit. First came Lila. She didn't bother with subtlety. She called me directly from a new number I hadn't blocked yet. The screen lit up with her name, and for a moment, I hovered over the red decline button. But something inside me, curiosity, maybe, made me answer. The moment I said hello, she erupted. "You're a disgrace, Maya." Her voice was sharp, venomous, not the saccharine tone she used online when pretending to be the bigger person. This was the real Lila, unfiltered, furious, and finally exposed. "You aired our family's business like it's some reality show," she hissed. "What the hell is wrong with you?" I stayed silent for a beat, listening to the rage tremble through the phone. "You manipulated everything," she continued. "You made us look like monsters. You twisted it." "No," I said evenly. "I told the truth. You humiliated us. You made choices," I said, voice cold now. "I just made them visible." "You're unbelievable," she snapped. "Self-righteous, bitter, pathetic." I hung up. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't even throw my phone across the room like I might have once. I simply placed it face down on the table, poured myself a glass of water, and breathed. One breath. Then another. It felt like power. Less than an hour later, my father called. This time, I didn't hesitate. I let it go to voicemail. He left a message, his voice tight and clipped, like he was holding himself back from yelling, but not very well. "You're tearing this family apart, Maya. I hope you know that. You've always had a sharp tongue, but this is cruelty. Public, unforgivable cruelty. We raised you better than this." "No," I thought. "You raised me to stay silent." I deleted the voicemail. I didn't need to hear any more. I knew exactly what would follow. Calls from relatives who hadn't spoken to me in years, Facebook messages filled with confusion masked as concern. People would reach out to say they just wanted to understand, while trying to gently nudge me back into line. But there was no going back. My post hadn't just broken the illusion, it had burned it to the ground. I blocked Lila's number. Then my father's. Then my mother's, before she could follow behind them with her own brand of whispered manipulation. And when I was done, I stood in the middle of my quiet apartment and exhaled. There was no guilt. Not this time. There was no ache in my chest, no second guessing. Only the sound of my own breath and the steady, grounded thrum of relief. Pure relief. It startled me a little, how immediate it was. How light I felt. The weight was gone, the constant hum of dread, the pressure of managing their emotions, the exhausting tightrope walk of saying just enough to be heard, but not so much that I was cast as the problem. I didn't realize how deeply embedded that tension had become in my life until it was gone. I made tea. I sat by the window. I watched the city flicker into night. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't feel watched. No one needed something. No one was waiting for me to fix anything. There was no invisible leash tied to my time, my wallet, my energy. I was free. I slept better than I had in months. Maybe years. The next morning, I woke up to sunlight. No messages. No emotional emergencies. Just the quiet thrum of my own life stretching in front of me like an open road. I went for a walk. Not to clear my head, but because I wanted to move my body, feel the air on my skin, let the world remind me that I existed beyond their drama. I stopped for coffee and didn't feel the familiar tug of obligation dragging me toward Westwell, or my inbox, or anyone else's needs. I was alone. And it felt like peace, not punishment. That day, I started deleting old reminders. The calendar events marked Call Mom. The spreadsheet labeled Family Budget. The grocery list app one used to monitor for their household. Gone. 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 Every deletion was a tiny declaration. I choose me now. Later that afternoon, I passed a bookstore and wandered in. I didn't need anything, but I wanted to browse. That was reason enough. I spent an hour drifting between shelves, touching spines, losing track of time. I walked out with a new journal and a copy of a novel I'd been meaning to read for years, but never quite had time for. I had time now. That night, I sat with the journal in my lap, pen poised, staring at the first blank page. I wasn't sure what to write at first. But then the words started flowing. Not for anyone else. Not to explain or justify. Just for me. I wrote, "This is what freedom feels like. Not silence, but space. Not absence, but choice. Not running, but returning. To myself." I paused, let the ink dry, and smiled. They could say what they wanted. They could post and gossip and rage. But I had my voice now. I had my clarity. I had my distance. And I wasn't going back. I had survived the fire. And now I stood in the ashes with nothing but myself, and that was more than enough. The first thing I did was change the locks on my heart. Not the metaphorical kind, though I suppose that happened too, but the real ones. The kind that kept my doors secure. I called my apartment manager, scheduled it for Monday morning, and watched as a stranger removed the old, worn lock I'd passed through 100 times without thinking. When he finished, he handed me a new set of keys. It felt like a ceremony. A quiet one. A declaration, not of fear, but of finality. The second thing I did was pack a box. Just one. Inside it went the last traces of my family I'd allowed to linger. Photos, gifts, letters, cards with scribbled "Love you" S that had once meant everything and now meant nothing. I didn't burn them. I didn't throw them away. I simply closed the box and slid it to the back of the hall closet like a chapter filed under completed. I didn't need to erase them. I just didn't need them front and center anymore. That week, I called friends I hadn't spoken to in months. The ones I'd pushed aside every time my mother had a minor emergency or Lila forgot to pay her rent again. I apologized for my disappearances. Every single one of them said some version of the same thing. "I'm just glad you're okay." And for the first time, I could say it back and mean it. I was okay. More than that, I was becoming whole. The Maya who used to be on edge all the time, who walked around with her phone clutched like a lifeline, bracing for the next guilt-laced message, the next bank request, the next emotionally manipulative phone call, she was fading. In her place was someone steadier. Quieter, maybe, but rooted. Someone who no longer measured her worth by how much she gave or how little she needed. I started going to yoga again. The slow, intentional movements felt foreign at first, like I was stretching parts of me I hadn't used in years, not just physically, but emotionally. I started reading in bed again, without the hum of stress buzzing behind my eyes. I even went on a date. Nothing serious, but I let myself be curious again. Let myself laugh without guilt. I told my story to no one new. Not because I was hiding it, but because I didn't need to lead with my wounds anymore. They were healing now. Quietly. Without needing to prove that they'd ever been there. One morning, I walked past a mirror and had to do a double take. Not because I looked different. Because I looked free. Not lighter, exactly. But clearer. Like the version of myself I'd been trying to find had finally stepped forward. I went back to Westwell one last time, not to the house, but to the edge of the town, where the road bends before the hills start. I parked there, got out, and stood still for a long time, watching the horizon. The sun was low, painting the sky gold and pink and orange. It was beautiful in the way things can be when you've let go of what hurt you. I didn't cry. I didn't feel some grand epiphany. I just stood there breathing. This town had raised me. It had also wounded me. But it didn't own me anymore. I turned around and got back in my car, watching the place shrink behind me in the rearview mirror. It felt symbolic, sure, but more than that, it felt like truth. The kind I didn't have to announce anymore. I wasn't leaving in rage. I was just leaving. A week later, I hosted a dinner at my apartment. Just a few close friends. We made food together, laughed over spilled wine and burned garlic bread. Someone brought up family, some story about their cousin getting married, and I noticed the silence that fell around me. A kind of gentle pause. I smiled and said, "My family's complicated." And that was enough. They didn't press. They didn't probe. They didn't look at me with pity. They just passed me the bowl of salad and carried on. And that was love, too. Love without condition. Love without expectation. Love that didn't come with a price tag or a list of obligations. Later that night, after everyone had gone, I sat on the couch with a cup of tea and looked around. The apartment was warm with candlelight and leftover laughter. And I realized this was my home. Not because I'd paid the rent. Not because I'd arranged the furniture just right. But because I had chosen it. Chosen me. I wasn't the same person who walked into her parents' house scanning documents that day. That Maya thought loyalty meant silence, that love meant sacrifice, that family meant always being the one to hold the line. This Maya? She knew better. She knew that love should never cost you yourself. She knew that being strong didn't mean being invisible. She knew that sometimes, choosing yourself means being labeled the villain by people who only loved you for what you gave. And she could live with that. Gladly. I sipped my tea and looked at the door. Beyond it was the world. Unpredictable. Messy. Wide. And mine. No more chains. No more apologies. No more shrinking. I didn't need their permission anymore. I had my own. And I was finally free.